Greetings and welcome to part 2 of how we go about creating a virtual install of vCenter on a Server 2012 virtual machine up inside of VM Workstation Pro. In our first part of this series, we created a virtual install of Server 2012. We then used the shared folder option up inside of VMware Pro Workstation, and we mapped a drive over to my host machine where the ISO image for vCenter was located. I then copied that image of vCenter over to my virtual install of Server 2012. I then joined the machine to my existing domain, and now we're ready to proceed. Prior to the installation of vCenter, we have to make sure that we meet the minimal server storage requirements, and that depends on the deployment model we will be using. For this demonstration, I'll be using vCenter Server with an embedded platform services controller. For that installation, we will need 6 GB for the program files, 8 GB for the program data, and another 3 GB for the system folder. Now, the way that I complied with all this is when I created my virtual install of Server 2012, I created a dynamic disk of 60 GB. I'm only building this here for a demonstration, so it's not something that I need for long term, but if it was long term, there would be additional storage for the ability to support vCenter over a long term period. We also need to be concerned about the Windows database requirements. Now, vCenter comes with a pre-packaged database that we're going to be using. This will allow us to handle up to 20 hosts and 200 virtual machines, which is plenty for what we're doing here. If you were in a very large environment with, say, 1,000 virtual machines, then you would want an external SQL database so that you could manage all of that data much better. So to recap one more time, we copied over the vCenter ISO image from my host machine to this virtual install of Server 2012, and we saved it to the root of my C drive. So we're going to go up and take a look at that real quick. So I'm up here inside the root of my C drive, and what I've done here is I've gone in and to the VMware vCenter folder, and I right click and I chose to mount this ISO image. Now when you do that, you end up with this virtual CD-ROM right here. You can right click on this now. You can say open, and you can start the installation process just by double clicking on the auto run. And in just a moment, the installation process will begin. Once the vCenter installation wizard pops up, we're going to select vCenter Server for Windows. And now we're just going to go down here and click on the install button. Do be patient with this installation process. It can take some time. So even though you think that perhaps there's no response from the installation package, be patient and give it enough time to respond. So vCenter is running through the installation process and it's doing a check. And it came up here and it tells me that there might be a problem with some networking issues. We're using the current issue or the current version I have for tcpip.sys. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that, and we're going to go ahead and continue on with the installation. Now that the installer has completed initializing, we can go ahead and click Next to begin the actual install. On this next screen, we're going to check the box to accept the license agreement and click Next. For the deployment type, we're going to go ahead and accept the default, that is the vCenter Server and Embedded Platform Services Controller, and we're going to click Next. So we've got an error message here letting us know we don't have enough memory. So we're going to go ahead and fix that real quick. So I'm going to say OK to this, and we're going to go up here to our VM. We're going to go to Settings, and we're going to go to Memory, and we're going to boost this up to 8 gigs. We're going to say OK to that. Chance to settle down. Now we should have enough memory to go ahead and complete this portion of the install, and we do. Notice that this fully qualified domain name pops up in here. Now this is very important. So we have to be able to find this machine up inside of DNS, and I've already checked my DNS server for the record. And this is the name that is present up inside of the DNS server for my domain. It's important to note that the system network name cannot be changed after deployment. So this is very important why we have a naming convention for our machines up inside of our network. This machine is going to be the vCenter, so I called it vCenter. That is its host name. And it belongs to my cyberoffense.local domain. Very simple, very easy. But that's how we have to do it. Once we have confirmed the fully qualified domain name, we can go ahead and say next. We get a warning about the name not being suitable for IP version 6, but I'm not worried about IP version 6. But it does tell me that the name is suitable as a fully qualified domain name for IP version 4. So I may ignore this warning if I do not intend to use IP version 6. I'm going to say OK to that. So here is the information that we need for the vCenter's single sign-on configuration. This is the default. We're going to go ahead and leave it at the default. And I've typed in my administrator password so that I can log on to the vsphere.local, which is the configuration or the domain for my vCenter topology. So I'm going to go ahead and say next to this. Make sure you remember that password. And remember to read everything that's on this screen so that you understand the importance of what you're doing. vCenter is going to create a service. This service needs the Windows local system account to run. I'm going to go ahead and allow for the default and use that Windows local system account so that vCenter can run on startup. So I'm going to go ahead and say next to that. On this next window, we're going to go ahead and accept the default and use an embedded database. We can go ahead and say next to that. These are all the different ports that vCenter must have access to be able to do its job. So we don't have any problem with allowing access to these ports. We're going to go ahead and say next to this. Unless you know exactly what you're doing, on this next screen, do not change the defaults. We can leave everything as is and just click next. We're going to remove the option to join the VMware Customer Experience Improvement Program, and we're going to click next. We are now to that part of the installation where we have to verify everything that we chose during the initialization process, and we're going to say install. So what happens with that memory issue? What happens if our machine does not have 8 gigs of RAM to spare? My host machine has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I consider that pretty normal nowadays. But if you only had 8 gigabytes of RAM, then you're going to have to select another deployment option. You won't be able to use the deployment option we use. You're probably just going to have to go with vCenter without all the bells and whistles. This is a large install, so you must be patient with this entire process. You can let the installation complete on its own, go grab yourself a cup of coffee, go for a walk, take a nap, whatever you need to do, but do not interrupt the process. After some time, the installation process does finally complete, and we're now ready to launch the vSphere web client. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. I've launched the web client. It's in the background. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. Now we're going to go ahead and run through this process of getting Internet Explorer to cooperate with us. Ask later. So what we need now to do is continue on to this website. Give it a moment. So I went ahead and accepted the risk of opening up the website, and now we're going to go ahead and log on. To do this, we're going to log on as administrator using that vSphere.local account, and we're going to type in the password that we created. Go ahead and hit enter or log in, and in just a moment we should have the console pop up here for us. We're getting a warning about Flash Player being needed, so I'm going to go ahead and install that. While we're doing that, you can go ahead and add this site, this vSphere web client, to your favorites so that you have it, and that way you don't have to worry about getting it. So we don't have internet access right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the internet, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take off the configuration that I currently have for my network adapter and put it back to DHCP. That's going to get me out to the internet. I'll be able to update my Adobe Flash Player, and from there we'll be able to get to the website. I don't think there's anything too unusual about this. You work in technology long enough, and you're going to see things that you just have to do to make things work. And this just happens to be one of them. So very quickly, I'm back out, and I've got my ability here now to install the Flash player. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to mess around with this. I'm just going to go ahead and go on out and just download Flash player. So I'm just going to go to Google. I'm not going to go to Bing. Alright, so I just want to type in download Flash player. Do that. And in just a moment, we'll be back up and running. Okay, so after much trial and tribulation trying to get Internet Explorer to do anything useful, I just gave up, went out to the internet, downloaded Firefox, the ESR version, installed that, went back out to the internet, got me a download for Adobe Player, the latest version, installed that. I then went back up to my browser, this time Firefox, went to my bookmarks, because I have imported everything over from Internet Explorer, and I have my vSphere web client as a bookmark. I then launched it. You will have to accept or make an exception for this website because the certificate is not being appreciated. Go ahead and add an exception, confirm the exception, and you'll be fine. Now, that concludes part 2 of this video series. We're now going to move on to creating a virtual install of a ESXi server. The ESXi server will be the emulator that we're going to use to create a virtual install of a virtual machine of Server 2012. So after we get done with the ESXi, we will create a virtual install of Server 2012, and then we will conclude this process by importing that ESXi server over into our vCenter Management Console. Alright, so I'll see everybody in part 3. Thanks.